Next week on Days of Our Lives, Salem may look like it is splitting into separate emotional stories: heartbreak, romance, therapy, jealousy, and revenge. But the more you look at this preview for the week of April 13 through 17, the more it feels like all of those threads are quietly moving toward one much bigger explosion. Because this is not just a week about people reacting to the past. It is a week about people making choices that could permanently change what comes next. So the real question is not simply who is in trouble next week. The real question is this: who still understands how dangerous the board has become before the game turns against them? The promo begins with a sharp emotional image. Stephanie walks out, the door slams, and Alex is left standing there with visible frustration. It is a simple moment, but it immediately suggests that something has shifted. This does not feel like a passing disagreement. It feels like the kind of scene that happens when patience is already gone before the conversation even ends. Stephanie is also shown sharing a warm, easy moment with Jeremy Horton in the town square. And that contrast may be the real point. With Alex, the energy is tense, abrupt, and closed off. With Jeremy, it is relaxed, open, almost restorative. The show may be quietly telling us that Stephanie is not just upset. She may be starting to emotionally sort people into two categories: the ones who exhaust her, and the ones who make her feel steady again. That is what could make this dangerous for Alex. He may still think he is dealing with one bad moment, one setback, one door slammed in anger. But Stephanie's behavior suggests something deeper. After everything she and Jeremy went through because of Owen Kent, shared survival may now be creating a different kind of closeness. The kind built on mutual understanding rather than romantic history. And in Salem, that can become a real threat very quickly. Because relationships do not always break when someone new arrives in a dramatic way. Sometimes they start breaking when one person begins to feel calmer, lighter, and more emotionally safe somewhere else. If that is what is happening here, then Alex may already be more vulnerable than he realizes. The preview then shifts into a very different emotional register, but one that may be just as volatile. Xander sees Sarah bonding with Brady, and the pain of that moment may go far beyond simple jealousy. What makes this scene effective is that it is built on proximity. Xander is not hearing about Sarah moving on from a distance. He is seeing connection form in real time. That is always harder to absorb, because it forces him to confront something he may still be denying: the possibility that Sarah's emotional life is continuing without him at the center of it. And Brady is a particularly complicated presence in that equation. He is not just another man standing nearby. He is someone Sarah can lean on, someone stable in the moment, and someone who naturally fills emotional space when another relationship is falling apart. That makes him threatening to Xander in a way that is more psychological than dramatic. Brady does not have to steal Sarah for Xander to feel replaced. All he has to do is become the person she feels safest turning toward. Because Xander is the kind of character who becomes hardest to predict when hurt starts mixing with humiliation. If he begins to feel that Sarah is not just drifting away, but actively choosing comfort with someone else, then the emotional damage may escalate fast. At that point, the issue is no longer just heartbreak. It becomes wounded pride, lost control, and the fear that he is being shut out of a future he still believed he could repair. And when Xander feels cornered emotionally, he rarely stays passive for long. So this storyline may not be building toward sadness alone. It may be building toward reaction. The closer Sarah and Brady appear, the more pressure may build inside Xander, and on this show, pressure like that usually does not stay internal. Compared to the louder emotional beats in the preview, Ari and Liam's scenes may seem quieter at first. But in some ways, that may make them more intriguing. Ari wants to know why Liam has been avoiding her. Liam tries to keep his distance. And then he says something that immediately changes the tone. It is not good for Ari to be around a guy like him. When a character describes himself that way, the show is usually signaling that there is something unresolved beneath the surface: guilt, danger, self-loathing, secrecy, or a mess that has not fully come into view yet. Liam may be trying to protect Ari, but he may also be revealing how he sees himself. Not as someone unworthy in a romantic, poetic sense, but as someone potentially harmful to be close to. And that creates a very specific kind of tension. Because warnings like that often have the opposite effect on someone like Ari. Instead of backing away, she may become even more determined to understand what he is hiding. She is not hearing a clear rejection. She is hearing a mystery. And mystery tends to pull people in much faster than safety ever could. That is why this story could become more serious than it currently looks. It is not just about attraction. It is about a girl who wants the truth and a boy who may believe the truth would push her away. That kind of emotional setup often leads to intimacy, but it also leads to risk, because curiosity can make people ignore the very warning they should have taken seriously. So while this may begin as a tender, uncertain young connection, the language in the preview suggests the show wants us to feel something darker underneath it. Not immediate disaster, perhaps, but the sense that Ari may be stepping closer to something she does not yet understand. As one relationship begins to crack, another may be facing an even harsher truth. Leo sits down with Javi and makes an emotional case for getting back together. He tells Javi he still wants him, and more importantly, he frames Javi as the person he was always meant to be with. That kind of language is classic Leo, intense, romantic, persuasive, and carefully designed to hit where emotion is most vulnerable. But this scene may not turn on how heartfelt Leo sounds. It may turn on whether Javi has already reached the point where hearing those words no longer changes anything. That is what makes the situation so uncomfortable for Leo. He is not returning to an open door. He is returning to a life that may already be reorganized without him. Javi has a new boyfriend now, and that detail matters because it changes the emotional battlefield completely. Leo is no longer trying to revive a memory before it fades. He may be trying to interrupt a present that is already becoming real. Because nostalgia can be powerful, but stability can be even more powerful. If Javi's new relationship gives him a sense of peace, clarity, or emotional security, then Leo's confession may land less like a second chance and more like a reminder of a chapter Javi is trying to outgrow. That is why this scene could hit harder than expected. Leo may come in believing emotion can still reopen the past, only to discover that Javi is no longer measuring love by intensity alone. He may be measuring it by consistency, by timing, by who actually showed up at the right moment. If that is where Javi is emotionally, then Leo may be headed toward a very painful realization. This time, wanting something deeply may not be enough to win it back. Then the preview pivots into something much heavier, and possibly far more important than any romantic fallout happening elsewhere in Salem. Theo turns to Marlena for therapy, and at first, the scene plays with a quiet kind of intimacy. Marlena reassures him that whatever he says will stay between them, which creates the feeling of a safe, controlled conversation. It sounds like the beginning of a standard emotional breakthrough. But what Theo brings into that room is not ordinary emotional baggage. It is a revelation. When Theo tells Marlena that Lexi is alive, the week immediately shifts into a different category of drama. This is no longer just about heartbreak, jealousy, or romantic instability. This is the kind of disclosure that can reframe entire storylines at once. A truth like that does not stay contained inside one therapy session. It changes how the audience views the past, how characters may respond in the present, and how several power dynamics could shift going forward. And then the preview pushes it even further by tying Theo's confession to EJ's experiment. That connection is what gives the material real weight. It suggests this is not simply a shocking return or a surprise reveal. It is a revelation with consequences, and those consequences may lead directly back to EJ in ways that are morally, emotionally, and publicly dangerous. Marlena's role in all of this is especially important. Because Marlena is not just another character receiving explosive information. She is one of the few people in Salem whose reaction automatically matters. When Marlena learns something, the audience understands that the truth has reached a serious threshold. Her judgment carries emotional authority. Her shock gives the revelation legitimacy. And if she believes EJ has crossed a line, then this may become more than a private scandal very quickly. He declares that family is, and always will be, his priority. On its own, that sounds like a familiar EJ statement, protective, forceful, and self-justifying. But placed next to Theo's confession, the line takes on a very different tone. It starts to sound less like reassurance and more like a defense before the full accusation has even landed. And on Days of Our Lives, those are often the moments when a character's own words end up exposing the contradiction at the center of their choices. If Marlena's storyline brings the week's biggest revelation, Sophia and Kristen may be bringing its most dangerous momentum. The preview ends with Sophia talking to Kristen about a mystery plan and admitting that she may need additional resources. That line is brief, but it tells us a lot. This does not sound impulsive. It does not sound like somebody lashing out in the heat of emotion. It sounds like a scheme that is already taking shape and now needs funding, access, or support to become something larger. Sophia is not just angry. She appears focused, and Kristen is exactly the wrong person to hand that kind of focus to, because Kristen rarely cares about proportion when revenge is involved. If she believes EJ deserves to suffer, then she is unlikely to worry much about how many people get caught in the fallout. Once Johnny is pulled into the equation, the target begins to widen. Hurting Johnny means this is no longer just about hitting EJ where he is vulnerable. It means turning family into collateral. It means making the punishment emotional, personal, and generational. And that kind of revenge tends to spread quickly, because once the goal becomes suffering rather than justice, the boundaries start disappearing. Then there is Holly, which may be one of the most revealing details in the whole setup. The fact that Kristen does not particularly care whether Holly goes down too suggests that this plan may not stay precise for very long. That matters, because the most dangerous revenge plots in Salem are often the ones that begin with a clear target and then spiral outward as anger, opportunity, and ego take over. What begins as punishment for one person can become destruction for several. That is why Sophia and Kristen feel so volatile together. Sophia seems to bring the motive, the secrecy, and the willingness to initiate something ugly. Kristen brings reach, experience, and a much higher tolerance for chaos. One of them may know what she wants. The other knows how to make damage happen. And that combination could become a serious problem for EJ before he fully understands how much is already moving behind his back. So as the week of April 13th begins, Days of Our Lives may be setting up more than one shock. It may be building a chain reaction. Stephanie may be drifting into a new emotional orbit. Xander may be reaching a breaking point. Leo may be about to hear the answer he does not want. Marlena may learn a truth that changes everything. And while EJ talks about family, enemies may already be moving around him in silence. But the biggest reason to keep watching may be this. Next week's drama does not feel random. It feels connected. And when Salem starts connecting heartbreak, secrets, and revenge in the same week, somebody usually ends up paying a much bigger price than expected.